Hi, I'm Mike Caton from Ace Method Coaching, and I've been coaching hurdlers for over 25 years. I've coached so many that I can't even count them at this point, and many of them have gone on to become state champions or state finalists and things like that. And in this process, I've learned a whole lot about how to take someone who doesn't know anything about hurdling and get them very proficient. And that's what I'm going to focus on in this video. Before we get into it, there's a concept that's important for you to understand. We as humans learn better when we break them down piece by piece, meaning rather than just telling an athlete, here's all the things you need to do to go over a hurdle, now go do it. We learn it if you can isolate movements. Like for example, isolate one arm until you learn it, then add the second arm, and then add a leg, or upper body, lower body. I'm going to show you some things throughout this that give you my idea, but just know that in general, that's a concept that you want to do when we're learning how or you're teaching somebody how to hurdle. So in addition to breaking it down to single body parts and then gradually adding more, it's also important that you go from very slow and simple to gradually adding speed. So I'm going to teach the movements standing and then do them walking and then do them over hurdles and then do them skipping and then do them jogging before they ever start running. So you can see the pattern that we do here. This is what's called the wall lead leg drill. You put the hurdle up against the wall and you step back about 3 feet or 1 meter. If done properly, you want to make sure that your leg cycles underneath you, where you try to raise your heel to your butt, try to drive the knee towards the hurdle, and then extend the leg. Girls don't have to fully extend, whereas boys tend to have to fully extend. Once you have it down with the legs, then you want to incorporate the arms into it with proper mechanics, with the arm going forward, also bent, and then the trail arm goes behind you with the bent elbow. Try to keep it near the hip. I always have my hurdlers do all drills with both legs, one so they can keep their body balanced, but also because on the longer hurdles, it's very likely that you'll have to go over with both legs. I also recommend for the movements that I'm showing you, you don't graduate onto the next one until you've mastered the current one that you're on. This is what's called a wall trail leg drill. Here you position the hurdle about 3 feet or 1 meter away from the wall. You get to the side of it, lean into the wall with the same angle that you would go over a hurdle with, and you practice bringing your trail leg over that hurdle. If done properly, the knee will come out straight out from the hip. I always kind of liken it to a dog taking a pee. But then as the leg continues, the knee rises. And two analogies that I like to use, I tell the athletes, try to pull your knee up by your armpit. Another analogy is to say, I want the bottom of your shoe to look at the top of the hurdle. And then make sure that it finishes in a high position before it comes down. The reason for this is that trail leg is the first step to the next hurdle and you want it to be powerful. This is what we call the arm drill. And you move your arms just as if you were hurdling. Generally, we like to do it with a 3-step pattern, as if you're in the 100 or 110 meter hurdles. Also, a lot of athletes, especially young beginner athletes, have a hard time incorporating too many things at once. So I like to break it down. In this case, I break it down to one arm at a time so they can really focus on it going through the proper range of motion. And again, you want to do both arms. But once you learn how to do both arms at the same time, you won't have to go back to just a one side at a time drill. Now, once the athlete has mastered these standing drills, then you can move on to the walking drills. This is what I call a walking trail leg drill. Like all beginner drills, I like to isolate it down to just the one part of the body we're working. That's the reason why I have Leah with her hands at her side. We can either do it with a 3-step pattern or just every step pattern. And you want to make sure that you do both sides. Do all drills with both sides. This is a walking lead leg drill. Again, we start with arms at the sides so the athlete can focus just on the legs. And you want to practice using proper lead leg mechanics. You want to pull the heel by the butt and the knee at the height of the hurdle, and then you extend the leg and down. And you also want to work on both sides. This is a walking lead leg and trail leg drill. You want to focus on those same good, proper lead leg mechanics and also trail leg mechanics, just the same way you would do as if going over a hurdle. Also, you don't want to use the arms so that you can focus just on the lower body and not get confused. You also want to do both legs. Once you master it with isolating the legs and the arms, and you get to the point where you can do both together, you'll never have to go back to the isolation of the legs again. This is a walking trail leg drill using arms and legs at the same time. Honestly, in this video, Leah is using her lead leg a little bit too much, but the focus is all on the trail leg, getting it perfect. I like to use the analogy of cutting off the knee. So I tell my athletes, imagine that you have a knife in the lead arm, and as you come back and you bring your arm back and your trail leg goes forward, you want to imagine that you're slicing off your knee with the knife. This puts your arms and knees in the proper position. This is a walking lead leg drill. Just like with the isolated drill, you want to really work on good mechanics of the lead leg, but now practice leaning into it, getting your arms in the right position and moving them through the range of motion as if you're actually going to go over a hurdle. And like all drills, you want to make sure you do both sides. This is a walking no hurdle drill. This is where you use both the arms and the legs, both lead leg and trail leg, as if you were going over a hurdle. This is more difficult than it looks. That's the reason why I recommend such a long progression of isolating the arms and the legs and the lead and the trail before you try to put it all together. But once you get to this point, you won't need to go back to isolated drills any longer. This is a walking isolated trail leg drill now going over hurdle. I would put the hurdles at the lowest position, in this case 30 inches. Have the athlete put their hand on their side so they only can focus on their legs. And you want them to use proper trail leg mechanics going over the hurdle. The trick here is to make sure that their lead leg steps in front of the hurdle before they pull their trail leg through. This is a walking isolated lead leg drill over hurdles. Again, just focusing on only the legs so the hands stay at the side. You want to practice bringing your lead leg over with proper mechanics. In most cases, athletes are going to do this over the side of the hurdle because it's too difficult while they're just walking to get it over the full height of the hurdle. This is a walking trail leg drill. It's using also the arms. Proper trail leg mechanics, and make sure the arms are moving just the way they should, and the cutting off the knee motion. Again, make sure you do both sides. This is a walking lead leg drill over hurdles. Again, focusing on the lead leg mechanics, but also adding in the arms at the same time. Make sure that the lead arm is bent, is in front of your body, but doesn't cross over. And then also the trail arm tries not to go past the hip and snaps forward quickly. This is a walking, isolated lead leg, trail leg over the hurdles. The lead leg goes forward, straight up, and extend over the hurdle. Then the trail leg pulls through properly. You want to do both sides. This is also part of my warm-up. If you haven't gotten that, you can get that from my website. Walking lead leg and trail leg over the hurdles, isolating their legs, then they can add their arms into it. So both the legs and the arms practice in a slow pace, moving in the proper mechanics. As always, do both sides. Now that the athlete has mastered the walking drills, we can pick it up to jogging and keep going from there. While beginners are still learning how to clear a hurdle properly, it's a good time to also start working on the speed approaching a hurdle and also running between hurdles. For that, I like to use either cones or small hurdles. We'll position the hurdles at what I call an off-speed distance. That's the distance that you can clear the hurdles with 3 steps between each and running at a non-full speed pace. In most cases, it's about 8 to 10 walking steps for the athlete. Then the athlete practices running over the hurdles try to get only 3 steps between each hurdle and try to not slow down over the hurdle. Also do it with both legs. Once you become proficient at that distance, you can increase the distance of the hurdles. You can use a tape measure, but I find it easier just to get good with walking steps. Leave the first hurdle in place, move the second hurdle 1 more walking step, the third hurdle 2 more walking steps, and the third hurdle 3 more walking steps. And now repeat the same exercise, but now you'll be running with a faster pace and a naturally longer stride. You can keep doing this until you find the distance that is good for you to be able to run at a faster pace. And you'll continue to do this as long as you can still run at a fast pace, but with proper leg mechanics. Don't ever get to the point where you feel like you're having to reach out in front with your steps in order to make it to the hurdle. Always practice landing underneath your center of mass. Now, once you get good at these short hurdles, then you can add higher hurdles or higher barriers, whether they're the small hurdles like I have here or pop-up hurdles that can go down at a lower height. And again, always practice with both legs. Once you get to the point where you're proficient clearing the hurdles with 3 steps between each and doing that with each leg, I recommend practicing 4-stepping between the hurdles. In 4-stepping, you will have to alternate which leg clears the hurdle. This is an important drill to learn, definitely when you start running the longer 300 or 400 meter hurdles, because you might have to use either leg for that, but also many developing hurdlers in the 100 meter hurdles have to use 4 steps, which means they have to alternate. This is not a bad thing. It's ultimately a good thing because you become proficient at both legs. This is practicing going from the start to the first hurdle. This is a common thing to do at most practices because the start is so critical in the success of the race in building up your speed quickly. If done properly, you take 8 full step speeds to the first hurdle and clear it with your favorite leg. Once the athlete can do this, now it's time to go from the start line and clear the first hurdle. The goal is to accomplish this in 8 steps. This means that you will have your lead leg back in the blocks. If you can't make it to the first hurdle in 8 fast steps with regular running stride, that means without overreaching, then you need to adjust your steps to 9 or 10. In this case, you will need to adjust your leg position in the blocks accordingly. With time and development, you will likely be able to eventually do it in 8 steps. Once you get your steps down, now we want to learn to go over the hurdle properly. You can find all the details about proper technique in my Hurdle Technique Analyzer, but here's an overview. Now that you've gotten the steps down, we want to make sure that you go over the hurdle properly. And that's where you pull in all the things that you've been learning so far in this video. But also another way to put it together, if you haven't already done it, you should check out my hurdle technique cheat sheet. You can get that at my website. You want to plant your foot about 5 to 6 feet from the hurdle. You want to lunge into the hurdle with full force. Your lead leg should cycle underneath your body like an exaggerated running step and then extend towards the hurdle. Your opposite arm will also go forward, and then your trail arm will be back slightly bent. You want to try to maintain speed and clear the hurdle as low as possible. Once you reach the top of the hurdle and you start to descend, your arms and legs will switch positions to maintain balance. You want to try to come off the hurdle tall and running versus jumping over it and landing on the other side. Now that you can go from the start line to the first hurdle, now it's time to focus on the other 9 hurdles and all the steps between them. Now here's a big concept to learn. It has to do with the steps between the hurdles. Ideally, all hurdlers are taking 3 steps between the hurdles. Now I realize that's easier said than done. It also depends on what part of the world you're in. In a lot of countries outside the US, but also in club track in the US, they start the younger athletes with closer spaced hurdles. Unfortunately, in the US, when it comes to middle school, they have those athletes running at high school spacing. So it's very difficult for them to do 3 steps. In either case, I recommend training new hurdlers to 3-step. Now, if you end up in a situation where you or the athlete that you're training here cannot make the hurdles in 3 steps, you have some choices. I never recommend allowing hurdlers to go with 5 steps. That's just a bad idea and something that's always going to be hard to overcome the bad habits that come from that. So I recommend either doing 3 steps or 4 steps. But ideally, you'll start practicing with 3 steps and then you'll make a decision after that. So in order to 3-step at practice, you're going to have to find the proper spacing that your hurdler needs to pull this off. From the start line, sprint to and over the first hurdle. Instead of stopping, continue to run and clear an imaginary hurdle on your 3rd step, starting with your trail leg. Have someone mark where your takeoff leg landed as you went to clear the imaginary hurdle. From that point, step off 5 feet and place a 2nd hurdle at that point. Starting back from the start line, run and clear the 2 hurdles with only 3 steps between the 2 hurdles. The point is to determine your ideal distance between the hurdles for you to be able to 3-step comfortably. Once that is successful, measure the distance from the 1st to the 2nd hurdle. Add a 3rd and a 4th hurdle at the same distance. Run from the start line to over all 4 hurdles with 3 steps between each hurdle. If you accomplish this in 1 session, that's a good day. Many times it takes several practices to do this. So you might be thinking, well, this is great, but in the races, they don't allow us to race at whatever spacing we want. And of course, that's true. But here's the concept. If your athlete can get comfortable with 3-stepping at the spacing that works for them, over time, they're going to get more efficient, they're going to clear the hurdle faster, they're going to run faster between the hurdles, their confidence is going to be up, and you can gradually spread out the spacing, probably in like 6-inch increments until they get better and better, until they get close enough to race. Now you're going to do this until your hurdler can get to about 1 foot from the actual race spacing. Once they get to this point, they'll be ready to race in a meet. Now, if it becomes obvious to you that your athlete is just never going to be able to reach that next hurdle in 3 steps, then you might want to start thinking about 4-stepping. And if that's the case, then everything is still the same, except now you're taking 4 steps between the hurdles, which means you're going to have to alternate which leg you use for your lead leg between every hurdle. But regardless of whether you're trying to 3-step or 4-step, when they're at practice, they're working with their ideal spacing. Again, gradually spreading it out over time, but that's the spacing they work with, because you never want your athletes to have to run with slow, stretched out strides to reach the hurdles. If they practice like that, that's the way they're going to race. Now, if you can give them a spacing that works for them and they're running really fast over those hurdles, then they're going to learn how to race really fast. So that's the concept. As you improve your technique, speed, and confidence, the distance becomes easy to reach and you can gradually spread the distance over the hurdles. Although it's tempting to do this many times as you get excited about your improvement, I recommend doing it only 6 to 8 times within one practice with plenty of rest between each run. Getting too fatigued leads to getting slower and more frustrated as you feel yourself getting worse instead of better, and there's always a greater risk of getting hurt when you're tired. Over the days and weeks, you'll be able to spread them out farther and farther, and once you get to within 1 foot of the actual race distance, you should be ready to race. Most hurdlers don't practice with the full hurdle distance at practices. It's very hard, even for the great young hurdlers, to reach the official distance at practice. They need the excitement and the energy of the race to increase their adrenaline. 1 foot shy is a good distance to simulate the race conditions when at practice. So to be clear, now in case you don't already know this, most hurdlers, even good hurdlers at practice, don't use the full spacing. They always reduce it. That's because at practice you don't have all the adrenaline that you do in a meet. And so it ends up actually feeling very similar to practice, and it translates very well into a meet setting. The same thing also goes with the height of the hurdle. Most hurdlers practice with about 1 click lower than they're going to race at. So what we've learned here is how to take an absolute beginner and get them pretty proficient to handle a race pretty well. Doesn't mean they're going to master it. Nobody masters hurdling in one season. It takes season after season to get better at it. Now once you're finished with this, you can consider my hurdling 201 and 301. 201 picks it up from right here and takes you from proficient to the point where you're doing really well and most of the time ending up in the fast heat at most of your races. 301 takes you to that point and says, now I want to be elite. So what are the things that I need to know to be very, very fast? So we're looking at techniques that only the best people can handle, and that's what that's about. And as always, if you need to know anything, you can check out my website at acemethodcoaching.com, or you can email me at acemethodcoaching@gmail.com. Have a good day.